Hi, this is Captain Scott,
This is Deckhand Jason.
and our boat is called Freedom. Today we're going to walk you step by step on how to create a halibut trolling rig on your end, which is used in the early season of halibut season out here in San Francisco Bay. And the final product is going to look something similar to this.
Now we're actually using this specific rig during the months of what? End of February into March?
March, April,
As soon as we get live bait, right?
the second live bait comes available, we change our setup entirely. So this is going to be when you're primarily targeting a halibut using dead bait only.
Awesome. All right, let's have a look.
Alrighty, so as mentioned, we're going to walk you through basically our setup when we're trolling out here in San Francisco Bay. We found it to be a pretty effective setup over the last few years. We primarily only do this specifically when we're fishing dead bait. Obviously, when the season switches over to live bait, our setup is a little bit different. So just a couple of materials you're going to need. So we use 20-pound monofilament. You have yourself a swing blade or a dodger. This is a 6-inch. We use a river salmon spreader bar, Hoochie, elongated bead. We like torpedo sinkers. And then lastly, we've got a 1/0 mosquito hook. It's an Owner, and we also have a number 5 stinger or treble hook. And then just a couple of snap swivels and then swivels. Right now we're going to show you how to set it up. Alrighty, so now we're going to start putting this together. So the first thing I'm going to do is, once again, we use 20-pound mono. We're going to do this in a couple of different stages. So I just like to get basically a size that long. We're going to trim it, especially when we cut the tag end. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to thread our number 5 stinger treble hook. And we're going to basically do it as a snell. So we're going to have the tag end on this end. We're going to come around with the other end of it, go through the eyes, and then we're going to line these up proper on the top of one of the trebles. I'm going to hold it in place. I'm going to wet it, and then we're basically going to do 6 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can do 7 if you want. We're going to do 6 for this exercise. So once this is complete, you're going to pull the other end of the tag in, and you're going to slide it through. You want it to be a little bit wet. All right, so what you're going to do now is I'm going to reverse my grip, put my left hand literally on the rolls that I made. And what you're going to see is this kind of thing here flapping around. You want to make sure this is lined up perfectly all on one side, even the tag end, because if you don't, it's going to look a little odd. And all we're going to do here is we're going to pull it, and then I'm going to take my teeth with the tag end and lock it into place. So that's basically your first step there with your stinger. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to trim off the tag end, and it'll look something like that. Okay, next step is we're going to take our 1/0 mosquito hook Owner, and you're going to thread it through. So this is where you want to basically vary your size. It's a function of what kind of bait and the length of your bait. We primarily fish always green tray anchovies. You could do herring if so, you just want to make your leader a little bit longer. But for this case, we're going to be fishing green tray anchovies. So what I like to do is basically measure it out like this. I usually know when I have that much of a gap right there that it's basically the right size. So what I'm going to do now is take my left hand and then reverse this, put the tag end through the eye. It's going to come through like this. And I'm going to repeat the same process. So I'm going to take both ends of the line on top of the shank, and then I'm going to wet it. I'm going to wrap it 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now what I have is basically something that looks like this. I'm going to put my finger on top of it, and I'm going to pull through on the other end of the tag. And I want to be cognizant of where my treble hook is so I don't get it snagged or stuck. I'm going to reverse my grip, so I'm going to pinch it. And now what you're going to have is something like this. So it's all on the top of the end of the shank, and I'm just going to pull it through. And then you're going to have something that looks like that. So the next piece here is we're going to do this in stages. So I'm going to add a swivel. And what you want to do here is align it so that way this is going to prevent your Hoochie from sliding down on top of your bait. So we're going to give ourselves a little bit of room. I like to keep it kind of like shoulder length. Now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna do a surgeon's loop. So I'm gonna take both ends, I'm gonna pinch it, I'm gonna wrap it literally across my finger. I'm gonna come back through, I'm gonna hold it like this, and then I'm just gonna go like that. We use this knot literally for everything halibut related. It's never failed us. And then we're gonna trim the tag end. So that's basically step one. So you want something that looks like this. All right, now that we've completed step number one, we're gonna walk you through step number two. So this is what it looks like on step number one. What we're gonna do now is I'm gonna leave a piece of line attached to the spool just so I can figure out my distance, and then I'll cut it. But what you're gonna do here is now take your mono and then come through the eye. Because we've already done a surgeon's loop here, we're basically not able to do another surgeon's loop on this side because you can't get it through. So we're gonna change our knot and basically do what's called the San Diego jam knot. Gonna do this a little fast. You can actually just YouTube how to tie a San Diego jam knot. It's gonna walk you through. But basically, we're just gonna loop it in between our fingers like this and then wrap it 5 to 7 times. So we're gonna do it 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what you're gonna do here is then come through this loop towards the bottom. You wanna come in and out. And then there's a little loop at the top, so you're going to want to go through that as well. And then you have your tag on the other side, and you want to wet it, and then you're going to cinch it down. So that's basically what it looks like. So what we're going to do now is cut off the tag end. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is just simply measure out a nice piece of mono here to complete the rest of the setup. Okay, so now we have plenty of room to work with. We're going to take a bead. It's offset. You can find these on Mack's Luhr's website. It's going to go down. We're then going to take a Hoochie, rig it through, and it's going to come down. So what you'll notice is that the reason why we put a bead in here, because it actually protects and makes the head of the Hoochie stand up a little bit higher. Different types of Hoochies, depending on how you cut it, will have a wider opening. In this case, it's a small one, so we know the bead will work, but if you accidentally cut too big, it's gonna go right through that swivel, so you just wanna be cognizant of that. So the next piece we're gonna do here is complete our setup, and we are basically going to tie that surgeon's loop again on a normal swivel. So a couple of things here, you wanna be very cognizant of your distance. So remember, your swing blade or your dodger is going to be on this side. So the further away you are from your dodger, the less action you're going to have on the back end. And that Hoochie may not be working, or your bait. We like to keep our Hoochie pretty close to our dodger or swing blade. We tend to go about shoulder length, right around something like this. And what we're going to do is that surgeon's loop again. So just grab both pieces, make literally a loop, come right between. And then you're going to want to cinch it down. So it's going to look something like that. And then what you can do is just trim the tag end. So your product is going to look something like this. Once again, it really varies. We tend to have it a little bit smaller because when we attach our swing blade, we want that swing blade working for us. So depending on your speed, right, it's basically going to move like this in the water. And the further you are away from that swing blade, the less action you're going to have on your bait and your Hoochie. The last piece of our setup is basically just creating another little bit of a spacer here before we attach it to our river trolling rig or spreader bar, whatever you want to call it. So what we're going to do here is same concept. You can notice here that this is just a swivel end, so we're going to put this to the side. And we're basically just going to grab a snap swivel and just create that same surgeon's loop. Once again, it's a very effective knot. We use it for everything except for salmon trolling as well as sturgeon. So those are different setups, but everything halibut related, we literally just use the surgeon's loop, and it's been very effective. So now we're going to tie it here. Okay. We're going to trim the tag end. Now this next piece is, length that you prefer for your total setup. This here is going to attach to your spreader bar, which then attaches to your swing blade. We don't like to have a monster super long leader because obviously when you're bringing the fish on board, it's going to be harder to gaff because you have more distance, or it's going to be harder to net. So this is really up to you on how far you want it from your spreader bar. We are going to go basically the baseball stance, kind of this shoulder length like this. And then I'm just going to cut it here. And now what we're going to do is take the other end and just basically use that same snap swivel. And we're going to do the same setup. We're going to take a surgeon's loop, one finger underneath, here, cinch it, cut the tag end. So that's kind of one little spreader or leader. And the next piece is we've got this here. We're just going to attach this little length of line to the swivel. Notice my total distance now is basically a wingspan. You can go a little bit longer on this. We'd probably, if we were to redo this, go a little bit longer on this side. We like to have it, basically a wingspan out. And the last piece is this river salmon leader. Once again, we use these.
We call those. We purchased those on Amazon. They're Luhr Jensen spreader bars.
Yeah. We only use these when we're halibut trolling. We don't use the three-way swivels because you can get a lot of tangles. This here is really effective because when you snap it here, it's gonna basically give you length away from your main line in your setup. So that way you reduce the amount of tangles that you have closer to the head of your setup. So it basically looks like this. And the last piece we're gonna do right here is the weight. So we're gonna set this aside. Now on the weight side, this is very simple. You're just gonna cut yourself. We use 20-pound line. Other people go lighter tests, you can. Doesn't really matter. So we're gonna take a swivel, same surgeon's loop. We're gonna tie it. Okay, we're gonna cut the tag end. Now here we like to measure these a certain length. So on the other end, we're gonna take a heavier duty snap swivel. The reason why we wanna go heavy is because depending on the type of weight you use, so you can use heavy lead depending on your depth that you're fishing. So we just want this to secure obviously the weight. So here we're gonna go something like that as a good length.
What is that roughly, like 5 inches, 6 inches or so, Scott?
I don't know, 8 inches, something like that.
Anywhere in, that 5 to 8 inches, but everyone has a difference, so their own choice of opinion.
So we kind of like to keep it bouncing off the bottom. You can go a little bit shorter. We found that if you go super short, you're gonna get a lot of muck when you're dragging your weight on the bottom. So we like to give ourselves a little bit of bounce, something like that. Now what we're gonna do is take our setup and then basically here, attach this to the bottom of this. And then the last piece is basically attaching a weight. You can use whichever weight, obviously depending on the depth, the current, the tide, the speed. We like torpedoes. We found that they're pretty effective. We also use pyramids as well. It just depends if you want a big bounce on the water. Ultimately you want your weight to kind of hit, then pop up, hit, then pop up. We just like using these. So this is basically what your end product looks like. And what you're gonna do here is just attach your main line, and then you can basically put it in the water after you bait up, and you are good to go.
All right, guys, we're out here on the water right now. We're close to Alameda Rock Wall. Scotty's got us on a nice sort of cruise control right here. So, as Scotty alluded to, I got my whole rig set up. I got everything as in the leader for the weight, the leader for the dodger, as well as the leader for the halibut. And right now I'm going to show you how to drop this setup in. I grab it by the main line, and the reason why we have a snap swivel to the spreader bar is so that we can interchange our gear quite easily. So I'm going to hold it by the main line. I'm going to take all my gear. I'm going to drop the leader for the halibut first while holding the main line. Take my rod out of the rod holder. I'm going to slowly descend the weight. Now Scotty's going to give you a good sort of representation of that dodger and that sort of the bait in the Hoochie. You get a nice sort of back and forth action, and a lot of action on that anchovy. Now we use brine anchovies just so it hardens the bait, and so over time it won't soften up. Now when I descend this leader down, I put it in free spool, but I'm going to slowly descend it, and there's a reason for that. You don't want to obviously just drop it, because sometimes your leader will get wrapped around, you know, your equipment, as in your weight leader or your spreader bar. So I'm going to slowly descend it until I feel that bottom. The way I'm going to feel is by sort of a no resistance, the tip, it's going to come up a little bit, and I can feel it. So once I hit that bottom, right now I hit the bottom, and I'm going to let it go maybe about 6 to 10 pulls. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I put it back into strike, put it in my rod holder. Now, always check your drag when you're, sort of settled in. I'm gonna check it by pulling it out. All right, that feels good. I'm gonna also put my clicker on. That way when the halibut does take the bite, we can hear it. And they're quite easy fish to pull in. So
this is the final product, right? You want your tip kind of just bouncing up and down. There's some action in there on the swing blade. Ideally, you want that weight to hit the bottom, kind of come up, hit bottom, come up. A lot of factors can impact this: the speed you're trolling, the tide, the swell if you're against the tide, or sorry, against the current, with the current. If you have a drift sock, no drift sock. So you just want to then adjust your weights and then go a little bit heavier, but you just don't want it to drag.
Yeah.
So kind of pop bottom, come up, pop bottom. So in this case, we'll give this a little bit, check baits, 10 minutes, then we may go to a 14-ounce weight here, so we get a little bit more bounce. But we know right now that it's literally hitting and coming up, because we can see the tip, doing a little different type of action. So we hope that you found some of the tips on this video useful. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to write them, and we'll try to answer back with additional details and feedback. Thanks a lot, and then look forward to connecting with you on the next video.